Hello, you lovely, lovely people. It's just been watching. I've been watching a Rafi Tulfo thing, and it just reminded me of where we used to live. This story that was happening, and it was like a wake up call, really. Um, where me and my wife lived, before we came here in Pinyan, we lived in a place called Galas, and the barangay was Barangay Lawag, and there was 3 apartments. And right next door to us, there was this girl. I won't say her name. And it is quite a sad ending, actually, this story. And, she had a baby who was half foreigner. And, she was a very friendly girl. Very, very friendly. She's a little short girl, she was. And, as I say, always friendly. Anyway, she got talking, and the baby belonged to an American guy. And at this particular time, he was back in America. And she got talking about how she met him in that, and she met him on a dating site. And he came over, and he was a born-again Christian. This, like American guy, and the girl was Catholic. But anyway, he managed to persuade her to leave the church that she used to go to and go to the born-again. He was very controlling. Don't know. I can't say anything about that. That's my dog chasing a chicken in the garden. I can't say anything about that because, as I said, I never met the guy. But anyway, they had this child, and apparently he was controlling, and he was convincing her to do this and convincing her to do that, and he went back to America. They were still together. Now, this guy, he was sending small amounts of money for child support, really, I suppose. But they were still together. Now, this girl, and I don't know the amount, but apparently it was never enough. Okay, it was never enough. Now, what happened was, she met somebody else while he was in America, and she began to have an affair, because that's what it was, isn't it? And they got married here as well. I forgot to mention that. They actually got married here in the Philippines. And she was having an affair, and he was going to come over. Right? This guy, who's the father of her child, and her husband, he was going to come over. But because she was with this other guy, she made this story up that he was not sending enough money, maintenance for the child, and a bunch of other stuff, where he was violent to her when he was here, and when he was coming over here, he didn't know, but he got into the air. I don't even know where he flew into. He would either been at Manila probably, or Cebu, or somewhere like that. And he was blacklisted. So she got him blacklisted without him even being here. He was in the States, sending money, but apparently he was very controlling. But he was still sending money for the upkeep of his child, and as far as he was concerned, they were still together. But since she met the guy, she didn't want him back over here. So, like I said, she, I suppose, filed a case, I suppose, and had him blacklisted. And he come over here and was sent straight back. Now, I'm going back. This was the time. Oh, God. This was the time of, yeah, I think it was during COVID. I think it was just before or during COVID, because it was the time when husbands, because during the COVID time, there was a lockdown, wasn't there? So no one could come in the country and no one could go out. But during the time of COVID, I don't know how far into it was, they were allowing the husbands back into the Philippines. So it was around about that time. And he wasn't allowed into the country. He was blacklisted. because this girl met somebody else here. Now, the tragic end of this story is this husband of hers, who was blacklisted, he was still sending money for the maintenance, and she had the audacity to ask him, could he buy her a motorcycle, which he did. He sent her the money for the motorcycle. I don't know why he was still talking or anything like that. Probably because he wanted to, to see his daughter at some point. And he sent her this money for the. But as I said, I've got to say this. The girl come across really lovely. She's a really pleasant and friendly girl, joyous and happy. So maybe this guy was, like a bit of a bully and doing the things that she said. But nevertheless, what I'm trying to say is you can still get your partner blacklisted even if he's not here. By saying, what she did, or by making allegations like that. Because like we all know, the law is here to protect, especially women and children. Especially that. Anyway, he bought her this motorcycle. And I was talking to her one morning. I said, have you got a driving license for that? No. I said, should you be driving then? And she said, well, everyone else does. It's true, everyone else, they do drive here without their licenses. And we moved because then we bought this place. We bought the land, but we hadn't done anything with it. But we moved closer to this place so we could start work. And we rented a place just up here. And we heard through the grapevine that this girl, I was going to say her name there, she had an accident and she was in hospital, and I think she was in there for a couple of days, but she come good for a little while, then she just took back, she died. This is the story. She died, okay. Now this is the tragedy about it. And the husband couldn't even come into the country to take care of his kid. Now, I know further down the line, because this girl's sister was taking care of the child, and she was a born again as well, actually. I think he had convinced all of them, so he must have been very good at persuading people. But she was taking care of the child, and I said to her, because I went to see this girl when she was laid to rest, and I said to her, look, I said, if there's anything I can do, just shout out, just give me a holler. You got my number. If the baby, by that time I think the baby was 2 years old, I think. I said, if the baby needs anything, just give me a shout, and I will help as best as I can. Well, I didn't get no phone calls or anything like that. I mean, I was expecting to, but I didn't get anything. And the husband was trying desperately to get his child into America. But apparently, in order for him to do that, he had to come over here and sign documentation and all of this and all of that. And because he wasn't allowed in the country because he was blacklisted before, it took him 1 year. 1 year to go through all of the documents, the paperwork, so he get back into this country, to sign the documents in this country, and to get death certificates and things like that to show the American embassy. And the end of the story is, this child now is living in America. And this child now must be, what, was it 2-year-old? It must be about 7 or 8 year old now. Maybe a little bit more than that. But it just goes to show you, if your wife or your husband, Filipino, doesn't want you to come back into the country through any reason at all, they can, and you're not there to defend yourself. This is the thing. They can do these things without you even knowing about it. So they can make an allegation when you're in, you've gone home thinking everything is great. You've gone home to go to work or what have you. And he was on a tourist visa, by the way. He wasn't on a 13A. And he comes to fly back into the country, and he's met by immigration who said, you're blacklisted. And, why am I blacklisted? I bet that's what he thought, but that he was blacklisted and he couldn't come into the country. So this is what I'm saying, people, is They can do this to you. They can do this to you. And it just reminded me of this story now, because I was just watching a similar thing, but it wasn't the same, but it was where this woman had made an allegation against this guy, and he was in America, but he was allowed back into the country, and he was on the air traffic toll for sure. It wasn't about kids or anything like that, but he was meant to have been a bit of a twat to his wife. And when he was in the States, she made this case against him. He was allowed into here, but he's gone through something now, trying to get himself out of it. But it just goes to show you, doesn't it, that you just don't know what people will go to. You don't know what lengths people will go to for their own selfish ways. But really, he could have pressed charges against her if he was allowed into the country, if he'd have found out that she was having an affair, because we all know if you're married here and you have an affair, it's illegal because there's no divorce. Even during separation, apparently it's still illegal to have an affair, adultery basically. And that's the story, really, people. It's mind-opening, isn't it? Because, as I said, I never met this guy. He'd been and gone, before I even, was living there. But what a shock for him, coming back. Thought he was going to see his kid and all that sort of stuff, and his wife. And bang! No, you're not coming in, sir. Huh? What? Why? Because of that. It's a very fragile place to be if you're in a relationship here with a woman. Because even shouting, if I was to shout at my wife, right, she could, if she wanted to, go to the barangay captain and do a blotter against me. And then then we would have to go down to the barangay captain and see if we could sort it out. And if it couldn't be sorted out, then the police get involved. But if she shouted at me, I can't do anything. Or a Filipino can't do anything. It's only if the Filipino, the man, shouts at the woman. Like that cockerel shouting at me. I can't do nothing about that. Goddamn cockerels. But yes, women have a lot of rights here. The Women and Children's Act, it runs deep here. And I think it's pretty unfair in a way that women have more, I suppose it's the same in the West, really, isn't it? Women have more rights than the man. But I suppose on paper in the West it's not like that, but it is. For an example, you get divorced, 9 times out of 10 it's expected the woman gets your custody of the kids, and you get access, which was in my case. But with my case, when I first, with my ex-wife, there was no case really. We just, I could see my kids when I wanted, really. But here, it's very different. Like I said, you raise your voice to your Filipina, and she can go and make a case against you with the barangay, and they will act upon it. If you're a Filipino, foreigner, anything like that. I don't know if it's ever happened here, like this barangay. I know there's a lot of blotters that do go on here, and it's mainly women doing it. But I don't get that involved to know what these blotters are about. But it's just that, and it was just that Rafi Tulfo thing that was just. I thought, I remember that time, and I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, yeah, I remember that. But it's just imagine. I went back to England for a while, and my wife thought, don't want him back in the country. I don't want him back here. She could just make up an allegation, and they wouldn't let me in, and I'm not there to defend myself. That's terrible, isn't it? That's terribly one-sided. But the law here is for the women in that way. That's it, people. That's all I want to say today. So listen, I'm over and out. Just remember, if you got a wife, keep her happy, because happy wife, happy life, get back into the country. Ha ha! Thank you, people. Over and out.